Hello and welcome to Will You Still Love It Tomorrow? I'm Dave.
And I'm Annie. Each month we take it in turns to nominate a film, TV show or book we were a fan of before we were married and the other one doesn't really know.
Then we both watch or read it and then we come together and discuss our reactions. Fair warning, there will be spoilers.
This month, Dave's choice was the 1977 TV show The Fantastic Journey, in which a group of people are transported into another realm and have to figure out how to get back. Why did you pick it?
So, despite it being from 1977, when I would have been 5, I presume I must have seen it when it was on reruns later on, but despite it being from such a long time ago, and it turning out that there was only actually ever 10 episodes, somehow it was seared into my brain, particularly the opening titles. And it was definitely one of the many shows around the sort of period when I was growing up that really sort of contributed to my love of science fiction going forward. And there's other shows around the same time that did a similar kind of thing that we might do later on. I'll be reminded of quite a few of them by the show. But
you seem to have had an awful lot of things seared into your brain as a young child.
Yeah, it probably explains quite a lot, doesn't it?
It does, especially if it's all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, what were your overall thoughts?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I have questions.
Oh, damned with faint praise.
But, you know, it was 70s. It was day glow. There were some good bits and some not so good bits.
Yeah.
It passed the time relatively painlessly.
Ooh, so harsh. Would you like to give a plot synopsis if people haven't already been put off by your well, it was slightly better than being poked in the eye with a sharp stick?
Well, I mean, first of all, did it hold up for you overall?
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it. There were several excellent science fiction tropes, which I'm sure we'll come to later on. And of course, at least for one episode, Roddy McDowall. So,
well,
you know,
always good value. Although you told me about that before, and so I was waiting, and he didn't turn up for quite some time. And then he was kind of weird.
Well,
and kind of evil.
He's Roddy McDowall.
Well, true.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, in terms of plot synopsis, I'm going to have to wing it. So, there is a professor of unspecified scientific bent who hires a ship along with some of his students.
It's more of a boat.
It is a boat, yes, it's true.
Yeah.
A very small boat for 9 people.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they go off on a trip, a scientific trip for the summer, along with his son.
Yeah.
In the Bermuda Triangle.
Mm-hmm.
And they get sucked into some green smoke.
Yeah.
And end up in a weird, wibbly place where there are lots of animals that shouldn't be in the same place, and privateers from the Elizabethan era, and funky science fiction people with glowy scanners. And they have to try and figure out how to get back. So
basically it's another classic example of the kind of science fiction show which is set up to enable a fixed set of characters to move around from location to location in order to be able to do either standard science fiction-y things or some kind of reflection of modern day stuff. Now the obvious example for that is Star Trek, which wanders around from planet to planet and has all sorts of different things. Doctor Who, again, is very similar. You can jump to different time zones. I think better contemporaries for this are things like Sliders.
Time Tunnel.
So there's very much these kind of episode of the week things. And in this particular case, the idea is that they've landed on this massive island, and there's what they call time zones, which is lots of different areas that as you wander between the border from one area to another, you jump to a different time period. And then, as I think you just mentioned, in episode 1, possibly episode 2, they come across a bunch of sort of English privateers from the kind of Elizabethan period. But later on in the episodes that we watched, they come across more sort of either distant past Atlantean super scientist people or sort of distant future super scientist people.
Yeah, getting into the facts, it was originally meant to be a historical thing where they would visit different time periods in history, like the Time Tunnel.
Or like Doctor Who was supposed to be until the Daleks turned up, and then it became Monster of the Week.
Exactly.
Which is...
But apparently this studio then kind of pushed it more into a futuristic direction, so the Elizabethan privateers were a bit of a one-off.
Oh, that's a shame.
I mean, there's 7 episodes that we didn't watch. So I don't know how much other historical stuff is in there, but it would have been really interesting. There's a thing we might explore a bit later on, because one of the ideas that would have been really great but just isn't touched on at all in the show is, why is it that these are the only folks who can wander around from zone to zone? And I was just thinking, wouldn't it have been an excellent show if you had like 7 or 8 different zones and 7 or 8 time periods where people were able, all those characters in a kind of sort of large Game of Thrones multi-character style, were able to wander from one time zone to another, and how they'd set up, different allegiances and all kinds of ways of interacting with each other. That would be a really interesting show. But
I think it would.
Not the show we
That's
watched.
not what we get. No.
Yes.
Do you have any other facts? The only other thing I had was that I noticed DC Fontana in the credits, and I recognised her name from Star Trek.
Indeed. So all my facts, as always, are from Wikipedia. So it was executively produced by Bruce Lansbury, who fed into lots of the sort of 60s and then sort of 70s and 80s contemporary types of shows. Wild Wild West was one of his. He did a lot of work on Mission Impossible and Knight Rider. But the main thing he was known for was show-running 88 episodes of Murder, She Wrote, starring his sister Angela Lansbury.
Ah, fair enough.
So that's the main thing he's
Never
known
watched
for.
it.
Oh, really? I'd put it in the show if I actually, thought it was all that good.
Fair enough.
I did not love it, sadly.
Okay.
But
Ineligible.
yes, he was
Probably for the best.
He was the executive producer. The producer was somebody called Leonard Katzman, who went on to create and showrun 14 Years of Dallas.
Wow. That's got to, kill your soul bit by bit.
Yeah. And as you say, DC Fontana, who was one of the really creative drivers behind the original series of Star Trek, working very closely with Gene Roddenberry, seemed to be in a similar kind of vein to this, wrote some episodes, but was very much kind of in charge of the writing room and making sure that the sort of themes of the show were explored. So she was very influential.
I have a feeling that she wrote some of the Star Trek tie-in novels as well.
Oh, she did all sorts of stuff, because she wrote episodes of Babylon 5 and, all sorts of bits and pieces. So, but it's one of those things where she was in the credits for many years in the original Star Trek series in the 60s, before the majority of fans realised that she was not a man.
Yes, very true. I remembered that she was a woman, even just from seeing her initials in the credits. Yeah, so, very cool.
So, the show was made quite short notice. It was what they call a mid-season replacement. There was a previous show called Gemini Man, which I don't really know anything about, which didn't get a lot of views. So they took that off mid-season and replaced it with this, and then the network mucked about with it a lot. It got moved into different time zones It got moved around a lot on the schedule, and ended up opposite The Waltons, which was like probably the most popular TV show on television at the time, and so subsequently was horribly killed, rather like Firefly as a contemporary version for that.
Good night, John Boy.
Well, yes. Did you watch it?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Well, I must have done, because I remember being absolutely horribly traumatised seeing the actor who played John Boy Walton in a World War One film once.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I must have been familiar with him as John Boy Walton.
Okay.
Anyway.
So, one of the other things that's worth mentioning, as I'm sure we'll get into, is how many of the characters that started out in the original episode or two get chopped, never seen again, incredibly quickly. And then there was a reason for that, which is that they're originally going to have a much larger cast to allow them to do more interesting things. And then the network came back and said, we both want to reduce the overall numbers of characters because they thought it was too many, but keep the high level of diversity in inverted commas.
Yeah, no, they said they wanted, they got rid. So what happens is there are 9 people on this tiny boat, and I just kept thinking, where do they all sleep? Because it was really small. Anyway, that's beside the point. So there were 9 of them. By the time they actually kind of get into the proper plot, at least 4 of them have been killed. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the first episode, 3 more of them disappear, never to be seen again, with no explanation as to where they've gone, really.
There is an explanation.
Well, yes, but it's not a real one, so we don't ever really know what happened to them. The Atlanteans say that they've been sent home.
You think they've put them in the food processor?
Well, they were originally going to kill them. And there was a discussion about what they were going to do. Anyway.
But what's his name's dad? You don't think they turned him into goo?
It's a very good question.
Well, I thought they'd sent him home with their time. He went to live on a farm.
Uh-huh. But the thing is that, yes, they said, the producers apparently said they wanted more diversity.
Yeah.
So they got rid of the main white man character and the two women, all of whom were white, and replaced them with a white woman and Roddy McDowell. I don't really see where the diversity comes from in that.
Well, Roddy McDowell's... I was going to say he's British, but he's not. He just comes over as though he should be British.
Yeah, so, I was a bit confused about that. But anyway.
Yeah. We'll
come on to diversity in a lot more detail.
Oh, I have quite the...
There are many...
I have quite the section
many
on
diversity points.
Issues. Yes. The last fact that I've got is that I kept looking at some of the costumes for some of the, not the main characters, but the other characters and some of the props that were around and stuff. And I'm like, that really, really looks like Logan's Run. And it turns out that when this was cancelled, all the people who were involved went on to make Logan's Run and presumably just took all the costumes and props with them and reused them.
Well, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was kind of mini skirts and go-go boots ahoy, really.
I'm not complaining.
Well, no, neither am I. But I do like a mini skirt go-go boot combo, I have to say.
Yeah. We were born in the wrong time.
Yeah, apparently.
I was saying to Annie the other day that sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be able to travel back in time to a previous point in my own timeline, to wake up in my own body in the past with the knowledge of all the things I have today, and then I realised there'd be no internet, and the horror is so visceral. I'm glad that'll never happen.
Yeah. Very true.
Can we talk about the start of the first episode?
Sure. What, the original pre-credits start in 1945?
No, we can talk about that if you want.
There are about 30 seconds of people flying planes in 1945 and then disappearing.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of American pilots flying over the Bermuda Triangle in 1945 whose instruments all go haywire and then they disappear. Later on, I think in episode 2, our heroes discover one of the planes on the island, and originally there was supposed to be a plot where they came across one of the pilots, and then that all got written out.
Yeah, Scott, the little boy, immediately identifies it as one of the specific planes that disappeared in 1945 because he has good knowledge.
Well, it says in the Wikipedia article, he says has plenty of knowledge, which means he's source of the info dump for a lot of things.
Pretty much.
But is naive enough to get into enough scrapes to require rescuing. But it wasn't actually that bit I was interested in. It was when we first see the professor, because there's a shot of him and his wife, who's on the original trip, I think. No, she stays behind. She stays behind. She
has to go and look after her sick father, so she doesn't go on the trip.
Ah, yes.
It's just Professor Paul and little Scott.
So how you do the name things, I don't know. I mean,
there's a whole thing about names.
I've got, just the kid and the professor and the black guy.
In the first 10 minutes, we get to learn that the captain of the boat is called Ben, that the professor is Professor Paul Jordan, and his son is called Scott. And then nobody else really gets a name for most of the rest of the episode. The women kind of get names around 20-25 minutes, and the single continuing non-white character, Fred, gets a name at 1 hour 10.
Okay.
So, yeah, I was making note because I kept thinking, I do not know what any of the names of these characters are, and that always distresses me. And I also didn't know what any of the relationships between them were, apart from Scott being Paul's son, and that some of the others may or may not have been his students.
See, it's really interesting because you're saying you're being distressed by not knowing what their names are, whereas I absolutely do not care what anybody's names are because I'm not going to remember them anyway, so it doesn't bother me that I don't know what anyone's names are.
I can't imagine what that would be like.
But yes, there's the first shot of them coming out of the university, and his students are carrying heavy stuff off to a van to take to the boat to go and do whatever it is they're doing in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
And
They have a microscope.
Okay. Professor Paul?
Yes.
Professor Paul is manly 70s man, standing next to his wife in a, I am the hero, look at my square jaw type of way. With his 4-inch wide tie, which was a thing apparently in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing that struck me there is that Scott's wearing a suit. He's 12 or something, and he's got his little suit on, and I'm like, that is apparently a thing that it was in the 70s. It's gosh.
Yeah, apparently.
Wow. But then they get on the boat and they start heading off into the Bermuda Triangle, and I just had the theme tune from Gilligan's Island playing in my head as soon as they set off.
See, that's another thing I've never seen.
I've never seen it either.
Okay, the only thing I know about it is from Galaxy Quest, when the Thermians are revealing that they think that all of human TV is documentaries, and what's her name? Gwen, I think her name is. Sigourney Weaver's character says, "Surely you don't think Gilligan's Island was real?" And the head of the Thermians goes, "Oh, those poor people." So I don't even know why they would be poor people, but they are. Apparently.
I mean, the only thing I know about Gilligan's Island is the theme tune.
Okay.
The 3-hour tour, and I just think these people are going to go off and get marooned on an island and have comedy coconut-based adventures. It's just but that was not how it turned out.
Well, they kind of have comedy coloured smoke-based adventures.
There's a little bit of that as it goes. So they set off into the sea and they see this purple cloud in the distance.
Green.
You're right.
It's very, very green.
Yes. Where did you get purple from?
I don't know, because the one in the next episode is red.
Yes, we'll come back to that one. Do they actually say that they try to steer away from it? Because there's mysterious cloud.
So.
Because
and it's quite far away.
Because there's quite a few times when there's a thing of some variety, and they go, on the horizon there is this terrible thing. Oh my god! And then they'll continue to go towards it. And
they didn't seem to make any attempts to avoid it in any way.
Yeah.
I did write that down. That was a little bit weird.
So they get engulfed in the giant green cloud, and it's one of the few times that there's actually some little nice light horror touches where they get this ringing bell coming from all over the place, and they're all being, oh my god, what is going on? And it's all kind of affecting them mentally. And then after they get wrecked and they turn up on the island and they're trying to work out what's going on, one of the female characters is still hearing the bell in her head, and it's all the whole thing. Yeah. That was a nice little touch. We don't really get any of that after that. It becomes much more normal rather than kind of psychological effects for things. But
Deckhand Carl is lost in the storm and only named posthumously.
He's the one who fell overboard.
Yes.
He got a lot of lines,
He did get a lot of lines.
And then suddenly he was gone. I was like, oh, okay, we spent a whole bunch of time getting to know him, and then he's in the water. And then
so the other two science bros who are...
One of whom is Chinese American.
Yes.
So he turns up right at the start along with Fred.
And the blonde one who's never named.
And I was like, oh, diversity. And then episode 1, he's horribly squished. Just very briefly, I know I interrupted you, but what happened was the fishing boat sized boat that they were on gets wrecked, but when they wash up on the island, there's a little dinky type boat that can get 2 people in it, and they decide they're going to get in this tiny boat and zip out into the main shipping lanes to try and get rescued.
To
and
flag down a giant ship.
They're toast.
Yes, and then so they wash back up on the beach.
And nobody seems to care.
Not really. They didn't have names.
Well, I guess, but there's quite a lot of times in this show where people get squished and people are like, oh, well, I guess that was unfortunate. But,
It's very true.
Yeah. When they washed up on the island and they were all like, oh no, we are on a strange, mysterious island. Did that remind you of anything?
Lost.
Very
much so.
Very much
Especially
so.
when they then find the plane in the woods, in
the
jungle.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. There
isn't a polar bear, but there are giraffes and koalas and leopards. Oh my.
Okay. Yeah, so it was... there's definitely some tropey-tastic stuff from later on. Right. Where do you want to go now? Should I just pick some?
Yeah, I mean, most of my stuff is diversity stuff, I think.
Oh gosh, I have a lot of other stuff. Yeah, okay, so after they land on the island, they meet the English privateers.
Well, they meet Varian first.
Oh, they meet Varian first?
Yeah, he turns up as a silent Arawak Indian in disguise.
God. So, listeners, they're on the island, and we've talked previously about diversity. We've got Fred, who's the black guy, and we've got the unnamed Chinese American guy, etc., etc.
And that's it.
And they're
and a few women.
I'm going to say a few women, and they're stomping about the island trying to work out what's going on. And then this guy with kind of long hair and a loincloth turns up, being sort of Indian type, and he's like
silent.
Whitest Indian you've ever seen in your entire life.
It is quite amusing because I literally wrote down, I do not think the actor playing the Indian is really a Native American. I'm pretty sure he's white. And then immediately Scott said, "You're no Indian," and it turned out he wasn't.
I missed the bit where Scott said.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Scott and his.
Well done, Scott.
Diversity.
Scott, top-notch observation.
Yeah. So it turns out that Valerian is a guy from the...
Varian.
Oh, I thought it was Valerian, like in Valerian route.
No, Varian.
Oh, shows what I know.
He's from 2330.
Yes. And he had to make sure they were the right people, in inverted commas, by pretending to be an Indian and then somehow persuading Scott, the 12-year-old boy, to come back to his spaceship.
Yes.
And show him pictures of Earth and give him magic orange juice out of the incredibly impressive science and technological orange juice dispenser.
Yeah. And then when Paul and Eve also turn up, and he then spends absolutely ages explaining to them where he came from and what's happened to him and what he knows about this situation. He says, "We must go back and find your friends. It may already be too late." And I'm like, you've spent about 24 hours with them and not warned them at all. And then you have already decided that they're probably worth saving, and yet you still gave them a lengthy lecture on the future of the Earth.
Yeah. Well,
meanwhile,
there's a whole thing there, because he's like, in the 2330s, there is a utopia. The 5 races have merged together. And I'm like,
yes, that's quite strange.
Interesting. Which particular 5 are you talking about?
Yeah, I thought that.
But
meanwhile, Jill and Fred and Ben have been captured by Ian McShane.
Ian frickin' McShane? Oh my god.
Who looks younger than I think I have ever seen him in anything ever.
Well, it's 1977.
I know, but I thought he was one of these people like, I don't know, Gary Oldman and Ian McKellen who spawned in their 40s.
But the question for me is, since he's such an incredibly archetypal British actor, what's he doing in Los Angeles in 1977? There's a story there of some kind. Who knows? But yeah, he was great.
He was pretty cool. He had a good outfit.
Although there's a couple of things that don't make a lot of sense.
There's many things that don't make sense.
Well, it's true. One of which is that the group of English privateers have obviously been there for a while, because they've built themselves
12 years.
Built themselves a quite nice hacienda. But there's not many of them. And when some of our heroes turn up, and Ian McShane, one of his flunkies, who presumably doesn't get a name, takes a fancy to one of the girls.
Yeah.
And then Ian McShane says, we're going to, treat her properly. And he's like, no, I'm going to have this woman. And then they have a sword fight and he stabulates him.
Yeah.
You would have thought that if there wasn't that many of them, that they wouldn't want to go round murdering each other all the time. But maybe that's just me. I don't know.
Well, maybe that's why there aren't very many of them.
Oh, plausibly. The other thing is, given the time period and attitudes of the characters, when Ian McShane wines and dines the woman in question, then she still rebuffs his advances.
Yeah.
And his response is to drag her into the town square and declare that she is a witch and that she is to be burnt.
Yes.
I kind of assumed that instead he would probably have just raped her. I mean,
probably.
Yeah. So I can't imagine that he would just say, well, if I ask you nicely and you say no, my response is I'll just set you on fire.
Yeah, it was a bit unfortunate.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, it did kind of remind me of Pirates of the Caribbean when he takes her off into his captain's cabin and gives her a nice dress to wear.
Oh yeah. And
then she is disinclined to acquiesce with his request.
Well, indeed. One thing I did think was interesting when they washed up on the island and there are all these mysterious animals and these mysterious people and stuff, is that nobody at any point in time did the thing which they did do in Lost, which is go, are we dead? Which you would have thought would be one thing that somebody would have said.
I think Varian says at one point that when he first turned up he thought he was dead.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
But I can't remember what made him change his mind.
Varian is, as I wrote in my notes, a, quotes, smug son of a bitch, and then brackets, I like him a lot, which I don't know what that says about me, really.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, he does do the whole, well, you know, I have allowed your friends to be captured by the privateers who tortured me when they captured me, and yet I will not help you rescue them because I am a pacifist and cannot be involved in, violence, whilst Eve is merrily making Molotov cocktails with the 12-year-old boy.
That was pretty cool as it goes.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I liked her. I was ashamed that she disappeared and was never seen again.
Was she sent to live on a farm? Back
she
to the
was,
future.
yeah, supposedly, with Jill.
Yeah. Varian's interesting, partly because of the pacifism, partly because you can apparently read people's auras.
Yes.
Which I'm sure is a thing that will only ever be useful when the writers want it to be so.
Very true.
It's like
he's also got a funky sonic screwdriver.
I was going to come back to the funky sonic screwdriver, but the I can read auras thing reminds me of Deanna Troi in Next Generation and her ability to tell when people are lying.
Yes.
Which is only ever turned on when it's particularly useful, and you're like, so this person's been lying all along. But why couldn't she tell that at the start of the episode?
Yes, because he can tell when Roddy McDowall is lying to them, but he can't tell that the Atlanteans are.
There you go.
Inconsistent powers of deduction.
And as you say, he's got a glowy stick. Now, the seared into my memory from when I was little includes the glowy stick. I don't remember what it did, but I just remember what it looked like, and that he could point this glowy stick at things, and it was all things to all people. Now, he is allegedly a doctor of some variety in the future where they heal people through the power of sound.
Yeah.
And he points his wibbly stick at people and makes them better.
And also makes them fall down.
Yeah, but it also does loads of other different things as well. It is the sonic screwdriver.
It is a sonic screwdriver, yeah.
But what's interesting about him kind of being a 24th century doctor is that Fred is also a doctor.
Yes. I thought that was interesting too.
So you've got...
Again, we didn't find that out until episode 3.
But Fred's thing should be, I'm the party medic, I will look after all the people, and that gives his character some purpose. But then his purpose is completely overrun by Varian just turning up
sonic
glowy stick.
That's a very good point.
So yeah, it is all quite silly.
Yeah, well, what are you going to do?
Indeed. So they discover that they can travel between these time zones. Varian tells them all about it. Our heroes are like, I see, time travel. That's perfectly normal and not a thing that I'm going to spend any time talking about. Like, if this is actually the past, does that mean that I can go into the past and change the present by, going there and doing things, which is...
Well, it's quite clear that all of the people in the different time zones are trapped within the island.
So they've actually been transported somewhere rather than just stepping into the past. Which is interesting because the three major time zones that we see in the episodes, one with the English privateers in the Elizabethan era, one in the far, far distant past with the Atlanteans, and then possibly one in the far future where Roddy McDowall turns up, all have quite substantial buildings.
Yes.
So maybe those buildings have been pulled through into the time zone as well. I don't know, but it's
I don't know. It's quite confusing.
But
the suggestion was that the whole of Atlantis had been transported.
Was it?
Yeah, because Varian was talking about it being a myth in ancient Earth history, and that it was a civilization that was advanced and then had disappeared. So I think the suggestion was that the entire colony had been transferred somehow. Which is why they still had all their stuff.
I misheard it because I thought Varian said that they'd all been destroyed, which is one of the reasons I made a note somewhere about episode 2 saying, they have solved the problem from episode 2 and everything is better, except we know now that Atlantis is still going to get destroyed at some point in time. And it's like, they're not destroyed, they just hived away into the island.
Yeah.
The island.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but should we talk about episode 2?
Sure.
Best thing ever.
What's that?
Brain in a jar!
Yes, there is a brain in a jar.
You know me so well.
I do.
Oh God, it's got a brain in a jar, and I was just happy as anything at that point.
There's also Chekhov's cat.
I wrote down Chekhov's cat.
Chekhov's cat turns up at the very end of episode 1 and just is around in Atlantis, but there is, zooming in on it, trotting about.
Before we talk about Chekhov's cat and other bits, can I just talk about excellent science fiction tropes, as I've got written down? So just because we're talking about brain in a jar, I've got brain in a jar, best day ever, all in capital letters, followed by 4 exclamation marks.
Okay. I'm very happy for you.
Glowy tubes.
Lots of glowy tubes.
Oh,
yeah.
so many glowy tubes. The magic orange juice dispenser.
That's pretty cool.
He's got these kind of crystal things, and he taps the crystal things, and orange juice comes out.
It's not a replicator, though, because he says that he picked the oranges himself.
Oh, he did. So many things I didn't notice.
Yeah.
We've got the green glowy cloud at the start, and then the red glowy cloud that we see in episode 2, I think, which again is on the island, and they're walking towards it, and you're like, why don't you just go the other way?
Yeah.
You've got the magic glowy pointy stick. You've got the Atlanteans communicate by having these crystals that they kind of point at people in order to act like a radio, which is...
I don't remember that.
Yeah, they have these sort of large sort of fist-shaped crystals for stuff. There's a lot of funky costumes, and we'll talk about the episode 3 costumes in a minute, because they deserve their whole section. A lot of stuff, as I went on to Logan's Run afterwards.
You have a very Metropolis versus, kind of along the same lines as the Time Machine with the Morlocks in hemp loincloth togas in the basement who are kind of tending to the plants, and then the upstairs people with their shiny jumpsuits.
Yes, so
in funky communicators.
So in Atlanteum, there's definitely a Metropolis ripoff that I wrote down here. They call them the Unders. They're the people who are down in the basement keeping all the stuff going. And then there's a plot. The plot basically is the brain in the jar wants to use the life force of Scott to keep going and rule everything. And it turns out that the 3 people who are in charge of the city on behalf of the brain in the jar were supposed to be long-running characters.
Oh, really?
And then got wholly squished.
Rhea, Attar and Darrell.
Well, they weren't squished, were they? They
No, they did. I think they got killed.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. But anyway, we talked... Sorry, just on science fiction tropes bits, because we talked about costumes, we talked about props. I wanted to talk about architecture, because it's really fascinating. There's a whole kind of... I think there's a Reddit forum for this, but there's a whole thing about past views of the future.
Yes.
And if you look at Atlanteum and you look at the inside of Varian's spaceship, and you look at the places where Roddy McDowell hangs out in episode 3, they're very anachrofuturistic. And I find that stuff absolutely fascinating. And in particular, Atlanteum, which is supposed to be this incredible futuristic whatever, doesn't half look like a shopping mall.
I was thinking from the outside, it looks like some of the slightly weirder, shiny black skyscrapers in central London.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But the villa in episode 3 where Roddy McDowell lives really reminded me of the village.
Oh, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Oh, that's really interesting.
What's it called?
The Prisoner.
The Prisoner, yes.
Yeah.
It had a very similar vibe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
A very nice Swan Lake.
Yeah. So, what else was going on in episode 2? So, we have the whole Metropolis thing going on, and our heroes help the rebels, all 2 of them.
3 with the cat.
Oh, true. Yes, save the day.
The cat does most of the spying work.
Did we want to explain the cat and also
Liana?
Oh, is that what her name is?
Yes.
Okay.
Liana was my favourite thing about the whole show.
She did.
Apart from one moment that I was unhappy about, but we'll come back to that later.
She does have quite the outfit.
Yes.
It is what I...
Amazing miniskirt and go-go boots.
Yeah, it's very...
In different colours. Because she has a black one and she has a sky blue one.
What's the name of the really terrible James Bond rip-off films from a few years ago?
Why can I never remember this?
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Austin Powers.
Austin Powers. She did remind me very much of an Austin Powers character.
That is kind of true. But she was awesome. So there's... In Atlanteum, there are the people who... Well, there's the brain in the jar, which is called the Source. And was the guy who apparently took over a long time ago and then gave his physical body up to be able to rule over them with his awesome brain in a jar powers. So he is suppressing the Unders and removing their free will and their sentience so that they will be slaves. He has the triumvirate of Rhea, Attar and Darrell, who do his bidding and are the kind of human faces of the government, as it were. There's also the guy whose name I can't remember, who is down below trying to help the Unders, and he was part of the leadership at a previous time. And Lyanna, who has been transported there from a different planet, she says.
Well, she says that her... I can't remember which way around it is, but I think...
Her mother came from a different planet.
Ah,
that
yes.
was it.
And her father
is from Earth.
This is an Atlantean.
But she must have been on the other planet. She must have been raised on the other planet because she's super strong because of the gravity.
I don't remember that.
Yes. So she's like the D'Alembert.
Oh, yeah.
The family D'Alembert. So she's not physically stocky.
Yeah, Edward E. Smith, folks. That's right, isn't it?
E. Doc Smith.
E. Doc Smith, yeah. Books for people who haven't read them. Family D'Alembert is a set of characters that grew up in a high gravity world.
She's not physically altered by that, which she should be. But she's super strong and she doesn't get tired.
Okay.
And she has a magic cat.
And she has a magic cat, but she also has magic fluttery eyelash power.
That's true. Well, no, that's when she's talking to the cat.
No, she uses it on people as well.
Does she?
Yeah.
What does that do?
Yes.
It
does. Puts them to sleep.
It puts them to sleep, yes.
Yes, which is a fantastically useful trait that she then
never uses again.
Forgets to use in the future. Yes.
Yeah. She's phenomenally awesome in episode 2 and does all of the stuff. And she's helping with the rebellion and she fights and she runs and she communicates telepathically with the cat to get information about what the cat has seen up above, and she's brilliant. And then in episode 3 she falls down and needs to be carried and needs to be rescued and is rubbish.
Yes, we'll get to the I've got lots to write about her in the diversity section, but
she does awaken the emotions of the android boy.
Oh, in episode 3.
In episode 3, yes. So episode 3 is not such a good episode for Lyanna.
But
to begin with, she's great.
But you said something about a colony earlier. Was that mentioned in the show, or did you just make that up? Because I wonder whether what they were saying is that Atlantium was actually a colony of beings from another world, and maybe that's the whole plot for that. I don't know. I don't know what the writers thought they were going to do. But yeah, I was thinking about the cat. Because you're a writer and you go up to the director and say, I've got this brilliant idea, we're going to have this cat, and then the cat's going to do all of these things where it interacts with the other characters and has to go in specific places while being filmed, and the director's like, get out.
I did think
and
that.
I'm like, how on earth, how many shots would they had to have taken to get the cat to do all those really specific things? So you can't train it like a dog.
It doesn't do a huge amount. I mean, it mostly just runs up the stairs and then along the floor, and then Lyanna picks it up and looks into its face. But there is one point in one of the episodes where it's supposed to jump from somewhere into her arms, and it's obvious that someone's just thrown a
stuffed cat of some variety and then cut it. Yes, that was really amusing. Yes.
So it obviously wasn't as useful as they might have hoped.
Right, we've already talked a little bit about episode 3. Do we want to get into that now?
Oh my god, so much gold lame. I've never seen so much gold lame in my entire life.
For people who don't know what that is, would you care to explain? Because I've never heard that word before.
Sparkly gold material that got used a lot for science fiction stuff. So people, the Buck Rogers people used silver lame for most of their jumpsuits. But all of the Roddy McDowall has
a shirt.
He has a gold lame shirt and tie. And then a normal suit over the top. But all of his robot army are wearing gold lame jumpsuits. And it's really quite disturbing. So
they turn up in this time period where they've got this nice villa, and Roddy McDowall's in charge, along with all of his sons, in inverted commas, who are obviously robots. From the first second they walk on screen, you're like, oh, they're all robots. Excellent.
They walk in lockstep and say, yes, father.
Yeah. So, episode 2 has Brain Jar, and episode 3 has like 50 robots in. I'm in heaven at this point. It's all just amazing. But yes, so we discover that Roddy McDowall's character is actually from
the 60s.
The 1960s.
Yeah.
And has been trapped in the zone and has taken over the Nice Hacienda and all the robots from...
the green people.
The green people who are in the swamp.
Yes.
And
living in a cave in the swamp, reduced to second-class citizens by the white invader.
yeah, and they are mostly, I think, Hispanic actors.
Oh God, yes, that's a really good point. I think you're right.
So I think they're all Hispanic.
God, that's even worse.
I think they're all Hispanic actors in green face makeup.
Green makeup, yes.
And it turns out that
with awesome moustaches.
that they are intelligent enough to be able to invent the robots, but not intelligent enough to cure their leader of malaria.
Yes,
so
that's not an unreasonable point.
Varian presumably cures their...
No, Fred. Fred uses his medication that he has in his duffel bag.
Oh, the magic duffel bags.
The magic duffel bags.
So at the end of episode 2, they wander off into a new time zone carrying basically nothing, and at the start of episode 3 they arrive in a new time zone carrying a load of bags.
No, they leave Atlantium with the bags.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So they didn't have anything really when they arrived at Atlantium, but they leave Atlantium with 70s style duffel bags.
Okay.
With stuff in.
Yeah, not entirely
I don't know where they got
sure.
it from, but Fred apparently has a medical kit with anti-malaria drugs that work in about 5 minutes.
Entirely sure why you'd want to leave Atlantium, because it's it's nice there, and if they'd hung around long enough they could have repaired their time machine and just sent them home. But anyway,
well, maybe that's one of the reasons that they say they had the time machine. I don't think it was real. They were told that Paul and Jill and Eve had been sent in the machine back to Earth, but previous to that the brain in a jar had told his minions to kill them.
But
I think Attar did argue that sending them back would be better because it would raise fewer questions. But I don't know. It was never made clear what had happened to Paul and Jill and Eve.
So in episode 3 we've got our green people in the swamp. And as I was saying, we were told that they originally had the villa with all the robots in, and one of the things that Roddy McDowall...
They created the robots.
Yeah, one of the things that Roddy McDowall apparently did with his incredible 1960s genius knowledge is not only reprogram all the robots to serve him, but also change them all to look like him like humans, made them all white.
Yes.
So it's like,
And then the green people decide to leave them that way to remind them of their friends that they had made.
Did they?
Yes.
Yikes, I didn't hear that at all.
Yeah.
Wow, that's kind of appalling. But one of the things that I don't, because you haven't watched the other episodes, I don't know what other time zones we go into, but it's never explained when the green people come from.
No, or where.
Or where. It's
but we are aware that there are different planets with life on because of Liana's mother.
True, yeah.
So, I mean, who knows? I don't think it's meant to be cohesive.
Yeah. But it doesn't really matter anyway, because Roddy McDowall turns up and just acts everybody off the stage completely.
He looks so adorably upset when he's forced to be evil.
He's just... I mean, in terms of acting quality, he is better than everybody. He's 10 times better than everybody else on the show put together.
Yeah, that's true.
And it just... What it really, really made me want to do is see him do Shakespeare, which I don't know if he ever did, but he would have just been... he's up there with your... help me out here.
Ian McKellen?
And...
Patrick Stewart?
Yes.
Okay.
God, well done with the telepathy today. That was great.
I don't know. I'm not sure I'd go that far. I think in comparison to everybody else, he had quite a low bar to clear.
Well, there is that. Talking of which, it's another fantastic show for career killing. Most of the people who are in this never did anything ever again.
Wow.
Fred went off to go and do directing of a bunch of stuff that was not especially successful, but quite, what's the word I'm after?
Popular?
No.
Consistent?
No,
I got nothing. The telepathy isn't working today.
It was
Flush your eyelashes at me and I'll see if I can get it. No, that's just very disturbing.
Okay. My brain is saying cult, but that's not the word I'm after. Like, if you're a famous actor and you want to take a break from doing blockbusters, you go off and do...
Pulp. Trash.
Oh,
indie,
thank you. There we go. Yes, he did a lot of very indie stuff.
Okay.
And the guy who plays Varian was in 1 or 2 episodes of like 100 TV shows, so he's
well, you know,
doing a lot of stuff.
Managed to forge a career out of that.
The guy who played Scott and the woman who played Liana, never anything ever again.
Oh, that's a shame. Because she was great.
She was great.
I was going to look her up and watch other stuff.
I think if I remember correctly, she went off and became somebody who sold or founded a company to do with what is it when you dilute something to a point where there's no
homeopathy.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
It's disappointing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but anyway, Roddy McDowall turns up in his fantastic gold shirt. He says at one point, he looks at them and goes, "I assure you, everything is fine," and you just want to believe him because he's so
I think
good.
When he turned up, I wrote down suspiciously cheery.
Yeah, but he's just playing Dr. Smith from Lost in Space.
Yes,
I mean,
very much so.
He is just doing that character, but in a really, really nice way.
And then, did you have more to say, or can I say what happens at the end of that episode?
Well, I was going to do that, but you should do it now.
So after the green people are inspired by Fred's saving of their leader from the deadly malaria, and they're inspired to come out of the swamp and take back their home, they kick Roddy McDowall out, banish him to the wilderness and say that he can never come back. And he gets given his presumably original 60s leather jacket and polo neck jumper. And when the others leave, they find him sitting on a rock outside the area, not quite sure what he's going to do. And so they let him join their party and become one of the player characters. Well,
because they say that in the 1970s, he is known as being, because of the work he did in the 1960s, a incredible bastion of moral ethics, after which an ethics award was named for him being such a fantastic guy.
Which is all well and good, but their experience of him is him having shoved these poor people out of their home to live in a swamp.
Yeah.
Co-opted all of their robot slaves, and then tried to force Liana to marry him.
Yeah. Liana in particular is like, I don't seem to be all that fussed about that.
No, she's just like, oh, fair enough. Yes, you can come and be one of us. No problem.
So he gets Liana to... Liana turns up at the place. I can't remember how she gets separated, but she turns up...
When they go into the red smoke, all of the men are sent to the swamp, and she is left lying unconscious and beautiful in the grass, and is thus found by one of the android boys.
Oh, is that the bit where she stands up and says, "I've twisted my ankle"?
Yes, and then he has to carry her.
And then he puts her down again, and she goes, "Oh, it's fine now." Yeah.
It was just awful. And then she awakens his emotions.
The robot, not Roddy McDowall. Roddy McDowall decides he's going to marry her, and she's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then, rather like Ian McShane saying, okay, I'm just going to have you burned as a witch, Roddy McDowall says, oh, okay, well, I'll let you go, but before you go, drink this to celebrate the fact you're going on your way.
Yes, and then roofies her.
And then she's like, yes, I will drink this thing from this mysterious stranger who is just trying to force me to marry him. It'll be fine. Mm-hmm. But we're getting into the diversity section a bit, but the bit in the show earlier where she awakens the emotions of the android, I'm like, not only have you only been here for 5 minutes and are randomly smooching this guy, but also he's a robot.
Yeah.
So quite amusing.
As I said, episode 2, awesome kick-ass rebellion fighter lady. Episode 3 falls down, gets the robot boy to swoon over her, allows the guy to roofie her, and is almost forced into marriage.
Yeah, could have been better.
Could have been better, indeed.
Yeah.
And then needs to get rescued by the men.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to talk about? I might have a couple of bits.
Yeah, go for it.
I thought it was really amusing when they were escaping the English people that they steal their horses and dash off. Because I do wonder how many people would run up to the big herd of horses and 3 or 4 people jump on and go, off we go. And the person goes, I don't know how to ride a horse.
Well, yeah.
Because it's not like just an obvious
People's random ability to be able to ride when they wouldn't is often a thing that I notice. It's one of those things that if you actually know about stuff, then it really sticks out to you and stuff. But if you don't, then you never think about it. But I always think that. I'm always looking when people are riding horses to see whether they can actually ride horses, or thinking, would this person be able to ride a horse? Because it's not that easy.
No, it's really not. So I did think that was really amusing.
Especially at a gallop.
Well, yes, indeed. It had very much the sort of 60s, 70s and to some extent 80s issues with music. The music would suddenly get very loud when it was trying to...
I didn't even notice the music at all.
Oh, wow. It was suddenly...
Normally that's the other way around.
It would cut between different emotions. Now it's supposed to be romantic and now it's supposed to be action, right? And just these hard cuts between the music bits. And it got very loud in some bits. It had really properly funky outgoing music over the credits, which was
yes,
70s,
I did spot that,
70s static.
Yeah.
And when I said earlier that the costumes went on to go and be in Logan's Run, I'm all but 100% sure that some of the sound effects that I heard went on to be in Space 1999.
Probably.
Have you seen Space 1999?
I haven't, no. I think that is on the list.
Oh, that should definitely be on the list. Cool. Hopefully you can actually get hold of them. That was another show like Buck Rogers, where the first season was... Yeah, it was okay. And then the second season was just... What is going on?
I was a big fan of Buck Rogers.
When the bird guy turned up and they were on the ship that was travelling around rather than being based on Earth.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, that was the second or third season. It went badly off the wall by that
Fair
point.
enough.
Oh, and other things. We've got the sound effects going to Space 1999. We've got the costumes going into Logan's Run. We've also got a bit in episode 2 where the brain of the jar...
Yeah, the source,
has possessed Scott. And
well, sort of. I mean, he kind of created a copy.
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's right. And then evil Scott, evil small child, takes Fred and Varian off to horribly murder them somewhere. And then, I can't remember how, some way they do him in.
Varian actually disintegrates him with the sonic screwdriver, despite the fact that he's anti-violence. Maybe because it wasn't a real person.
Okay.
I don't know.
But did you recognise the effect?
No.
When they vaporised Scott, it was the effect from The Invaders.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Glowy and then dust.
Glowy red thing.
Yeah, and then pile of dust.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, good point.
So,
yes.
never...
These things do get around, it's true.
Never fail to reuse an effect you've already got on the books.
Yeah, good point.
So, yes, diversity. Where do you want to start?
Well, it kind of started off with one of the first scenes is the three science bros, as I'm going to call them, because only one of them got a name.
Bros.
Kind of getting ready for the trip and being all chummy. And one of them was white, and one of them was Asian, and one of them was black. And I thought, tokenism. And then, of course, the Asian guy got killed without ever being given a name. And for the rest of the episodes that we saw, apart from potentially the green people under their makeup, Fred was the only non-white character in it.
There's a bit, because I've got a whole bit to do with Fred, although because I'm bad with names, I've just written down black guy. And then
quite.
A whole load of stuff underneath him. But I've got my first note in, black guy actually gets a line.
Yes. Well, he's actually pretty pivotal. But he is a doctor and a scientist.
But he hardly ever speaks.
Yeah, and there is a gratuitous slow-mo bare-chested moment.
Oh, okay.
At one point.
I tenuously remember that. What's he really there for?
Tokenism?
Well, yes, but what's he really there for in terms of what goes on in the show?
I don't know.
Punching.
Oh, true, yes.
Because Scott's too small, Varian's a pacifist, and the other one's a woman, so they need someone to do...
Yeah, but Leona can fight.
But
she just doesn't after the first episode that she's in.
Yeah. So they need someone to do the punching. He's never short of punching somebody in the face.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a bit disappointing. I mean, I did like him.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, unfortunate.
But I've got other things about Fred.
Yeah, go for it.
So there's a comment in episode 2 where they're taking... whichever of the women was it one of the women who's never seen again, who's taken off by Ian McShane?
Jill.
So taking her off to go and have a nice dinner with Ian McShane, and Ian McShane says, "Oh, your slave can go and do whatever."
Yeah,
with my guy, which is very contemporary, but that kind of thing is so often overlooked in other science fiction TV series where they don't just mention race at all.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a nice situation. It was actually really well done because they said he's not my slave, actually, I freed him because he saved my life.
Mm.
And Imogen said, oh, fair enough, and then sends his slave to go and tick him off anyway.
Well, yeah.
So that was quite a thing. Fred says, I can't remember in which episodes, but at one point he says, I can't deal with the politics in this period. I have enough problem with politics in my own time.
Yes, I noticed that, yeah.
And then,
so
there's obviously a thing going on there.
Reference to,
there was a
civil rights.
There was a whole thing, again, I can't remember which episode it was in. There's a whole thing where he and one of the white women are running around and they're holding hands.
Yes, I think it's when they're running away from the privateers.
And the fact that they're holding hands is making it much more difficult for the two of them to actually run around. And I'm like, they're obviously... I think
he's kind of helping her along, supposedly.
Supposedly. But it felt to me like the director is making a point. It's like, hold hands, it's going to be a whole interracial thing, even though it would have been much easier for them to actually not do so.
Maybe.
But, yeah. So, do you have anything else about race?
Apart from Varian saying that the 5 races have melded into one in the future, which was very weird.
Yeah. I mean, I like the whole utopian point. Oh, he said, in the future, in our utopia, we waste nothing. We do not waste time or imagination or energy or anything. And I thought to myself, that sounds exhausting.
Yeah, maybe.
It's just... Should we move from race to women?
Yes. So
18 minutes to the first hysterical woman.
Yeah, I mean, Jill wasn't great. I mean, pretty much all Jill did was scream and have hysterics. I mean, she held her own a little bit with Ian McShane when she got taken off. She was the first one to kind of lean into kind of pretending that they were also of the Elizabethan period. She did quite well with that, and obviously had some decent historical knowledge.
She was obviously written in to be the person who was going to know all of the history.
Well, no, because it was Eve who identified Varian's outfit as an Arawak Indian and was talking all about the cave paintings.
I was looking at the thing and saying, oh yes, I recognise that. That is cuneiform. It is pre-Egyptian. It's not pre-Egyptian. Uh-huh. So, the showrunners are not doing too much research there.
Jill and Eve did demonstrate some decent knowledge. But yeah, Jill wasn't great, and she had to be rescued quite a bit. When they got captured, Ben and Fred are forced to walk with their hands tied in front of the horses, and Jill is put up on a horse in front of one of the others. And when they all escape, she's the only one who doesn't get her own horse. She sits behind someone else. So yeah, she is not great. And then we already talked about Liana. It was kind of awesome to begin with, and then failed miserably in the latter period.
Episode 2 is about rescuing a woman who has been captured by the bad guys, and episode 3 is about rescuing a woman who's been captured by the bad guys.
Yeah, it's kind of a thing.
Yeah,
it is true.
Yeah.
So I mean, it had its moments, but it wasn't great.
So we've covered race and we've covered women. There isn't really anything about disability in this episode. But
queer
characters. Oh, true. Yes, true. Although, mid-70s. So,
Yeah.
But I have another section of diversity which is normally completely empty, which is robots. There's so many robots in this episode.
There were so many robots.
Oh my god, it was so awesome.
And one of them gained, identity and emotion.
Well, I wonder if that will carry on after
from looking at Liana.
After the green people have come back and reprogrammed him again. But
yeah,
so many robots. It was awesome.
I'm glad you were happy.
Yeah. Anything else?
I don't think so. No.
In which case, shall we wrap it up for this month's discussion?
Sure.
Regular listeners will know that we rate episodes or books on a standard 5-star rating system with half stars allowed. What did you think of The Fantastic Journey?
I think I'm going to give it a solid 3.
Okay.
Because, I quite enjoyed it. It had its moments, it had its issues, but overall, reasonably entertaining.
Okay.
How about you?
Well, I'm torn whether to give it 4.
Oh, really?
Or 4.5.
What? What, just because of the robots?
And the brain of the jar and the glowy tubes and it's just got all of the things.
Sure.
I think a 4. I think.
Yeah, I think
I mean,
more would be a bit extreme.
It's got brain in the jar. It's got glowy tubes. It's got robots. It's got Roddy McDowell.
That's true. And it did look as though that was going to continue on.
Oh yes, he becomes one of the main characters.
The main people, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, maybe we'll have to watch the rest, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be awesome.
I would be interested to find out whether I'm assuming it just peters out without any kind of a conclusion because it got cancelled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, they filmed 10 episodes and only ever showed 9, so it's one of those ones. Yeah.
Fair enough.
So, yeah.
So yes, biggest question of all, do you still love it?
I kind of did. I mean,
You don't have to sound ashamed of the fact. There's nothing wrong with liking stuff.
Well, the race stuff is problematic and the
True.
female stuff is problematic, but, Roddy McDowell. Anyway, what's your choice for next time?
I am going to choose the 1949 children's classic book, Jill's Gymkhana.
Jesus.
By Ruby Ferguson.
Well, you definitely love it.
Well, I used to. We'll find out.
Okay.
It's been a while.
Uh-huh.
So that's what I'm going for.
That's about as far away from this as you can possibly get.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
And that's it for this month's episode of Will You Still Love It Tomorrow? Many thanks to Cambo for our theme music, and thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, please rate and review it wherever you get your podcasts.
And remember, if you have any comments, or you'd like to tell us about a time when you shared some media that you love, and whether or not you still loved it afterwards, you can always email us at willyoustillloveit@gmail.com, or you can see us online at Love It Tomorrow on Twitter. And remember, if you get in touch with us, we will send you some merch.
Yeah, very exciting. Please join us next month to find out what Dave thinks of Jill's Gymkhana.
And whether or not Annie still loves it after our discussion.
Could very much go either way.
Yeah.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.